Imagine the chaos unfolding 3.5 years into what was initially touted as a swift military campaign, promised to last only a few days or weeks. Instead, Russia finds itself trapped in a lengthy and bitter conflict. President Vladimir Putin's strategy, thought to be a straightforward path to victory, has morphed into a brutal war of attrition, relying heavily on sheer numbers of troops and equipment. With one of the most formidable arsenals globally, including tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery, Russia seemed poised for success. Yet, as the months dragged on, it became clear that Putin miscalculated drastically. The reality behind the battlefield is sobering. Russia's military machinery is deteriorating at an alarming rate. Analysts warn that by 2026, the Kremlin could deplete its stockpile of armored vehicles and crucial military assets. Amid mounting speculations about when and how the war might conclude, it's vital to scrutinize the losses incurred. The online database Oryx provides a stark look at the numbers. By September 2025, Russia had lost over 22,600 units of military equipment, nearly double Ukraine's losses. Among these, about 13,000 were armored vehicles, with over 4,100 tanks confirmed destroyed or damaged in just 42 months. This figure is based solely on what has been visually confirmed through satellite imagery and drone surveillance, suggesting that the actual losses might be even higher, estimated at 80 to 90% of all equipment tracked. As we delve deeper, insights reveal that, at the war's onset, Russia had approximately 3,300 modern tanks actively deployed. Reports suggest that it might have had between 5,000 and 17,500 tanks in varying states of allure, the leftovers from the Soviet era. Yet, by mid-2022, images surfaced of older T-62 tanks on the front line, a clear sign of desperation. Despite a calculated production capacity of around 250 modern tanks annually, the war's exhausting demands persisted. By 2025, Oryx's count revealed that approximately 3,100 tanks lost belonged to various models of T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s, alongside about 500 unidentifiable tanks. In contrast, Ukraine marshaled around 1,500 contemporary tanks against this onslaught. With Russia resorting to withdrawing aging models like the T-34 from obscurity, truly artifacts of past wars, it paints a grave picture of the present battlefield. In trying times like these, what remains of Russia's operational capacity? Data suggests a slow decline in military production and restoration, leaving the military scrambling for viable options. Will the Kremlin continue to push its forces into a battle that seems increasingly unwinnable, relying on outdated technology and dwindling numbers? Through the murmur of battlefield engines and the echoes of strategy meetings, one profound truth arises: Russia's once invincible military facade is cracking. As the war laboriously unfurls, each lost tank symbolizes a fading dream of might, shifting the balance of power in a world craving new dynamics. What comes next in this unraveling saga? The evolution of tactics within the Russian ranks hints at a desperate pivot away from traditional armored strategies, veering instead toward human wave attacks. A strategy reminiscent of bygone eras, punctuating the bleak reality of the situation. As for lone soldiers maneuver on motorcycles rather than tanks, one must ponder: how low will the Great Bear go before it reclaims its ferocity? Amidst the ashes of what was once a swift military campaign, Russia finds itself entrenched in an elongated struggle that began years ago. What was envisioned as a matter of days has mutated into a complex conflict, revealing the harsh realities of attrition warfare. Russian President Vladimir Putin's initial strategy of a rapid conquest has crumbled under the weight of unexpected resistance and the relentless nature of war. With a formidable arsenal featuring some of the world's largest stockpiles of tanks, artillery, and aircraft, Russia entered this confrontation with confidence. However, as the months dragged on, the stark truth began to surface: military equipment was suffering catastrophic losses at an alarming rate. Analysts now speculate that, by 2026, Russia could find itself stripped of crucial assets, a condition brought to light by various independent monitoring efforts revealing that over 22,600 pieces of military equipment were lost by September 2025. Among these grim statistics, around 13,000 were armored vehicles, highlighting a staggering deficit in capability. Particularly alarming are the losses of over 4,100 tanks just within a few years. These figures reflect only what could be visually confirmed through satellite observations and drone reconnaissance. The real picture could be even more daunting, as many damaged vehicles are hard to conceal, leading experts to estimate that recorded losses may represent only 80 to 90% of the actual depletion. At the onset, Russia had around 3,300 tanks ready for deployment, notably upgraded T-72, T-80, and T-90 models. Initial reports indicated that Russia possessed between 5,000 to 17,500 tanks in storage, remnants of a bygone Soviet era. However, by mid-2022, as pressure mounted on the front lines, images of older T-62 tanks resurfaced, signifying a desperate pull from antiquated reserves. Some analysts claimed that the loss count surged to 1,000 tanks early on, although later statistics would sharply eclipse these early figures as the battles raged on. While Russia did not halt the production or refurbishment of its military assets estimated at producing 250 contemporary tanks annually, it became evident that the dwindling resources could not keep pace with losses. Within 42 months, new tanks were added, but the net result was dramatically outweighed by the scale of those lost. According to Oryx, roughly 3,100 out of the casualties were confirmed as T-72, T-80, and T-90 tanks, with another 500 remaining unverified. In a stark twist, Russia began deploying T-34s by late 2024, vehicles first used in World War II, a harrowing symbol of the desperate measures being taken as time wore on. This reliance on outdated machinery underscores a chilling reality: the nation's military strength is waning. As the war drags on, so too does the ever-present risk of further diminishing its armored capabilities. In a dramatic turn of events, as credible assessments suggest that, without a significant overhaul, Russia will lack the capacity for effective offensive operations well before early 2026, the question looms larger: are the military strategies effective enough to turn the tide? What may seem like a laughable reliance on outdated vehicles, bikes and makeshift transport only emphasizes the depth of the degradation faced by Russian forces. Those once lauded modern tanks, such as the T-80 and T-90, despite their purported advances, are now facing overwhelming challenges in combat scenarios. Underneath the armoring lies a troubling truth: some of what was expected to protect these mechanical behemoths is compromised by corruption and inefficiency, allowing for critical vulnerabilities that drones have exploited with chilling efficacy. As the confrontation escalates, with a reliance on terrain and desperate measures morphing tactics into an improvised concession, can Russia manage to bounce back from the brink? The unraveling conflict offers an unsettling view for those caught in the crossfire, while a looming question remains unanswered: what will it take to restore balance, or will the tides of history sweep over? In a world scattered with echoes of war and conflict, the grim reality on the battlefield unfolds with every passing day. It has been 3.5 years since Russian forces ventured into Ukraine, a campaign initially envisioned as a swift strike that would conclude in days. Instead, Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, finds himself ensnared in a quagmire reminiscent of historical blunders, desperately clinging to a strategy of sheer attrition. While Russia began with a staggering arsenal of war machines, boasting one of the world's largest inventories of tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery, chaos reigns. Yet, strikingly, the heavy machinery that once instilled fear is rapidly diminishing, leaving experts questioning whether the Russian military can sustain its operations. As early as 2026, projections indicate that the nation might run dry on vital equipment, a disaster waiting to unfold. Recent assessments from Oryx, an online database diligently tracking the war's toll, reveal alarming figures: over 22,600 pieces of military hardware lost by Russia as of September 2025, a staggering number that surpasses Ukraine's losses. Among these, approximately 13,000 were armored vehicles, including over 4,100 tanks, casualties of relentless conflict across 42 months. It's imperative to remember that these are only confirmed losses. Real figures could be significantly higher, as unseemly evidence of destroyed equipment is hard to conceal from the watchful eye of satellites and drones. Early in the invasion, analysts noted Russia's initial stock of around 3,300 active tanks, consisting largely of upgraded T-72, T-80, and T-90 models. Surprisingly, the country is now reaching into its past, unearthing relics like the T-34, a tank synonymous with World War II. The sight of such an antiquated machine serving on the front lines serves as a bleak reminder of Russia's dwindling options. The T-34, a vehicle long celebrated as a symbol of resilience, now finds a strange kinship with Ukraine's more modern fleet, highlighting the absurdity of war. But the plight of Russia doesn't end there. As estimates suggest, the country's capability to produce and refurbish tanks has been reduced dramatically, falling from over 120 tanks per month to a meager 35 by mid-2025. Why? As the losses mount with each passing month, soldiers are forced to pull ever older models from storage, rife with wear and tear. The expenses tied to procuring repair materials have escalated, creating a dire situation where Russia's equipment fails to match its expectations. The reality on the battlefield is stark. Heightened drone warfare tactics plunge the attrition rates into alarming territory. Reports indicate that during the early months of 2024, Russia was losing an astonishing 1,000 armored vehicles each month, a figure that escalated to over 3,000 by the year's end. As drone units gain ground, they dismantle Russia's remaining armored units with merciless effectiveness. So, here lies the question: how can a military hope to prevail when the very essence of its might crumbles under relentless assault? The outcome hangs precariously in the balance. Will Russia find a way to adapt? Or will it continue its futile struggle, grasping for relics of a bygone era while facing a relentless foe? The battlefield awaits, filled with tension and uncertainty. The clock is ticking, and time may not be on Russia's side. Summary of the previous part: as Ukraine's drone attacks become increasingly effective, Russian tank losses escalate. The Institute for Strategic Studies warns that Russia will lack sufficient main battle tanks for effective operations by early 2026 if current trends continue. Adopting desperate strategies, Russia turns to human wave attacks with minimal armored support, leading to devastating losses among its troops. What happens when desperation replaces strategy in warfare? As Russia faces unprecedented losses, its reliance on armored vehicles crumbles. In a shocking twist, instead of tanks, the military is sending soldiers into battle on dirt bikes, scooters, and even vintage World War II motorcycles. Yes, you heard that right. Have we reached a point where history's discarded relics are thrust back into combat? In a radical shift, Russian forces are reverting to human wave tactics, where overwhelming numbers replace advanced equipment. This change has had catastrophic results, with attacks often leading to high casualties and minimal success. It's not comic relief, it's a grim reminder of the consequences of miscalculated leadership and strategic failure. How did it get this far? The Institute for Strategic Studies has made dire predictions. If losses continue at their current rate, Russia won't have enough main battle tanks to mount effective operations beyond early 2026. Is the situation truly this bleak? Evidence shows that Russia is losing more and more armor, with reports of a staggering 1,000 armored vehicles lost monthly at one point in mid-2024. As losses mount, what's next for a military that previously boasted one of the largest tank arsenals in the world? Now consider the condition of Russia's remaining vehicles. The celebrated T-80 and T-90, touted as cutting-edge tanks, show vulnerabilities that paint a troubling picture. These machines, designed with reactive armor, were claimed to offer superior protection against attacks. But the reality reveals something shocking. Reports surfaced of these tanks being equipped with clay bricks instead of genuine armor plates, undermining their image as formidable war machines. The irony is rich. What was once hailed as an indestructible force is now crumbling under the weight of internal failings, corruption, and misinformation. Russian forces have become a shadow of their former selves, relying on equipment meant for history books, not the front lines. And as the Ukrainian military executes its strategy with precision, how will the struggling Russian forces adapt? The evolution of tactics reveals the desperation behind the lines. With fewer tanks available, soldiers are being sent out on poorly protected vehicles. This regression means not only a loss of life but a profound shift in warfare dynamics, where speed and range are sacrificed for sheer numbers. Can Russia possibly recover from this devastating downgrade in operational effectiveness, or are they bound for an uncontrollable spiral into oblivion? Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the state of Russia's military capabilities and explore the consequences of this spiraling downfall. In a shocking twist on the world stage, Russia finds itself grappling with the stark realities of warfare that starkly contrasts the ambitions laid out by its leaders. 3.5 years into what was predicted to be a swift military campaign in Ukraine, a saga of miscalculations and mounting losses has unfolded. Once touted as a powerhouse with a vast arsenal of tanks, artillery, and air support, the Russian military's heavy machinery is being whittled down at an alarming rate. Despite starting this endeavor with an abundance of over 22,600 units of military equipment, as documented by Oryx, the narrative has quickly shifted from dominance to desperation. Among these losses are approximately 4,100 tanks, a staggering number that tells a grim story of attrition. Satellite imagery and drone surveillance have confirmed these casualties, while experts suggest that the actual numbers could be even higher. Much of this equipment, particularly the tanks, was among the newer T-72, T-80, and T-90 models, boasting advanced capabilities which, ironically, have not translated into battlefield success. Flush with outdated technology, Russia is resorting to pulling antiquated tanks, including relics from World War II, to the front lines. As absurd as it sounds, reports of T-34 tanks making an appearance serve as a sobering reminder of just how dire the situation has become. The landscape of warfare continues to evolve, yet Russia finds itself mired in the past, with equipment incapable of countering modern military tactics. As the conflict rages on, the revelations grow ever more startling. Analysts indicate that unless things change, Russia will face a severe shortage of operational main battle tanks by early 2026. Its reliance on human wave tactics, characterized by minimal armored support, has often led to catastrophic losses on the battlefield. The once feared Russian military is left scrambling for solutions, deploying soldiers on dirt bikes and scooters, which illustrates a downward spiral in tactical effectiveness. But it's not just the machinery falling short, it's the very technology underpinning it. The vaunted T-80 and T-90 tanks are losing their edge, falling victim to both corruption and outdated strategies. Once thought impenetrable, these tanks are revealing vulnerabilities, proving susceptible to modern threats from above, like drone strikes that bypass traditional armor. Meanwhile, a new and humiliating twist emerges. Reports indicate that Russia has become reliant on artillery supplies from North Korea, a nation emblematic of isolation and economic hardship. To think that such a powerful military is now dependent on the shipments of a struggling ally brings a new layer of embarrassment to the narrative. North Korean containers filled with millions of artillery shells are filling the gaps left by Russia's dwindling munitions, raising serious questions about the state of their once-lauded military strength. The world watches as a powerful empire grapples with its own inadequacies while attempting to assert dominance amidst adversity. The tale is far from over, as we uncover more layers of this complex and ever-evolving conflict. Scrutinizing Russia's decisions and their dire consequences on the battlefield. Each twist and revelation adds fuel to a story that continues to captivate global audiences. Will Russia find a way to course correct, or are they doomed to repeat the same mistakes, only deepening their ruin? In a shocking twist of fate, what was intended as a rapid campaign for dominance has spiraled into a protracted conflict. 3.5 years since the invasion began, Russia finds itself entangled in a war of attrition against Ukraine, far from the quick victory it had anticipated. President Vladimir Putin's strategy has devolved into a numbers game, relying heavily on sheer firepower. However, a critical question looms: how sustainable is this strategy when the very equipment needed for war is depleting at an alarming rate? Let's delve into the grim statistics. Russia entered into this conflict boasting one of the world's largest arsenals of military hardware. Yet, the Oryx database reveals daunting figures: over 22,600 units of military equipment have been lost by September 2025. As the proverbial clock ticks, analysts predict that Russia could exhaust its supply of vital machinery by 2026. How can an empire crumble when it started so robustly? Here's where it gets even more concerning. Russia relied on a stock of approximately 3,300 active tanks at the onset of this war, yet visual reports indicate a staggering 13,000 losses of armored vehicles sustained within just 42 months. With these valuable resources dwindling, the question of survival hangs in the balance. Villages and cities echo with the sounds of rumbling machinery, but what happens when those machines are sent to the grave? As the war rages on, an unexpected twist reveals itself: North Korea has become a surprising ally. Containers laden with 4 to 6 million artillery shells have been shipped to Russia. A lifeline from one of the globe's most isolated nations. Strikingly, Russian forces are expending up to 10,000 shells each day, vastly outpacing their own domestic production capacity, which barely meets 2.3 million shells annually. It paints a desperate picture of a military machine operating at the end of its ropes. However, the artillery landscape is even murkier. Many of these imported munitions are relics from the 1970s, riddled with quality concerns. In fact, reports suggest that nearly half of what arrives from North Korea may not even function. Imagine, an entire military strategy hinges on potentially faulty equipment. How can a nation rely on such dubious resources to ensure its survival in warfare? In a last-ditch effort to salvage its position, Russia must confront another uncomfortable truth: as the quality of its artillery fails, the struggle becomes one of numbers over reliability. This has led to increasingly desperate tactics, relying on outdated vehicles that echo from the annals of history. What happens when a military is forced to retreat to strategies that even history deems obsolete? As we unravel this tale of military desperation and evolving tactics, one must ponder: will Russia be able to regain its footing, or is it destined to spiral further into chaos? The battlefield echoes with tension, as every moment presses on, and each lost piece of equipment marks one step closer to an uncertain future. What's next for a nation grappling with the undeniable weight of its choices? The answer may redefine the battle and forever alter the geopolitical landscape. 3.5 years into what was initially planned as a swift campaign to overrun Ukraine, Russia finds itself in a tangled web of setbacks. Russian President Vladimir Putin, once thinking of a quick triumph, now stares down the barrel of a prolonged war of attrition. Despite starting the conflict with one of the world's largest caches of military equipment, the reality is much grimmer. Russia's arsenal is dwindling at an alarming rate, and analysts predict that it could soon be stripped of vital resources, perhaps by 2026. As battlefields evolve, bringing constant scrutiny and analysis, we must examine the numbers that unveil Russia's plummeting military status. An online database, Oryx, meticulously chronicles the losses, highlighting over 22,600 units of military equipment wiped out by September 2025. This staggering figure stands at roughly double the losses suffered by Ukraine, which may appear unfair without context. Among these, about 13,000 are armored vehicles, including over 4,100 tanks, all confirmed damaged or destroyed. Interestingly, this figure reflects what can be visually verified through satellite images and independent verification, hinting that the actual number could be even higher. Some analysts crudely estimate that visual recordings might account for 80 to 90% of total losses. This puts the scope of Russia's military debacle into sharp relief. According to the 2022 Military Balance Report from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Russia began the conflict with around 3,300 active tanks. But it also held a stash of potentially up to 17,500 tanks in varying states of disrepair from the Soviet era. As the war progressed, it became evident that older tanks were re-entering the fray. By May 2022, reports surfaced of T-62 tanks being pulled from storage, revealing the extent of military desperation. While early claims suggested a loss of 1,000 tanks, this figure didn't paint the complete picture of Russia's unfolding drama. The stark reality is that despite ongoing manufacturing efforts estimated at about 250 tanks produced annually, the losses outweighed gains. As we delve deeper into this unraveling situation, prepare for an unexpected twist. The very machines Russia once relied on now resemble relics. September 2024 saw the desperation escalate further with the deployment of T-34 tanks and infamous, aging design from World War II. What does this signal? It paints a terrifying image of a military retreating to antiquity, with any hope of a breakthrough slipping away. What does the future hold for Russia's military? Analysts from the IISS paint a dire forecast. If the current operational tempo and losses persist beyond 2026, key assets could be severely compromised. With Russia already adjusting its battlefield strategies, relying increasingly on manpower over machinery, we find ourselves on the precipice of absolute chaos. Armed wave tactics deployed without effective support only add to the woes of troops facing unthinkable losses. As the conflict takes its toll, the dramatic shift from high-tech warfare to the primitive chaos of mopeds and dirt bikes begs the question: can a military truly combat modern foes with outdated methods? This stark image of a war that is turned on its head reveals the collapse of Russia's military machine, leaving it trapped in a cycle of despair, desperation, and a longing for a glory that may never return. As we unravel this ongoing saga, we will explore the depth of Russia's military failures, the shocking revelations of its equipment quality, and the impact on global geopolitics. Amidst this uncertainty, one lingering question remains: can quantity really compensate for catastrophic quality? Stay tuned as we dissect the consequences that echo beyond the battlefield and into the very fabric of world security. In a staggering twist of fate, 3.5 years after launching what they anticipated would be a swift campaign into Ukraine, Russia finds itself trapped in a conflict of attrition. What was envisioned as a quick blitz has spun into an unforeseen quagmire, with Russian President Vladimir Putin's grand strategy faltering dramatically. While Russia began with a formidable arsenal, boasting one of the world's largest inventories of military hardware, tanks, armored vehicles, and aircraft, reality paints a much grimmer picture. But here's the shocking reality: Russia's military might is being dismantled faster than anyone could have predicted. Analysts suggest that within a few short years, they may run out of critical armored vehicles. That's right, by 2026, they could be left in the dust. While the battlefields continue to echo with the sounds of warfare, key figures indicate that Moscow has lost over 22,600 units of military equipment by September 2025. This staggering figure is nearly double Ukraine's losses, highlighting a significant shift in the tide of battle. Among these devastating losses is a staggering 4,100 tanks, with reports suggesting the actual toll could be even higher due to limitations in record-keeping methods. Flashback to 2022, the air is thick with tension as Ukraine's military intelligence reports surface about the state of Russian forces. In the early days of the conflict, Russia boasted around 3,300 tanks, including upgraded models. But as the war dragged on, the battlefield images painted a different story, showing a desperate pull from older, outdated models, some are even World War II relics. Can you imagine dragging a tank from the past into a modern battlefield? Yet, the real drama unveils itself when we observe how Russia's production capabilities have been on a roller coaster ride. Despite the chaos, reports suggest that Russia managed to produce about 250 contemporary tanks per year, hoping to replenish their ranks. But with the losses mounting, can they keep pace? As we delve into the brooding statistics, Oryx's findings reveal that approximately 3,100 tanks lost consist of various T-series models, while Ukraine rallies with about 1,500 tanks, showcasing how far the situation has shifted. Then comes the real kicker. As the summer of 2024 rolls in, a shocking transformation happens. Russian tactics evolve, with the once proud use of advanced armored units now replaced by human wave assaults and even scooters to send soldiers toward the front lines. Can you hear the echoes of desperation? Now, let's talk about the reputation of the T-80 and T-90 tanks, once heralded as the pinnacle of military engineering. Reports indicate that these formidable machines might not be the beacons of strength they were claimed to be. We've learned that the purported advanced armor is sometimes an illusion, with tanks found stuffed with mere clay bricks instead of the formidable materials advertised. This shocking revelation exposes the underlying rot of corruption and deceit within the Russian military apparatus. The spotlight shifts to the S-300 and S-400 defense systems, aging relics meant to guard against aerial threats that are now proving ineffective. With over 30 confirmed launches destroyed by Ukrainian forces, these once feared systems are crumbling under the relentless pressure. Even exported versions fell to Western powers with ease, revealing cracks in Russia's armor. There's more. The move to repurpose these anti-air systems into ground attack weapons. We are witnessing a historic re-evaluation of military strategy. But can missiles designed for air defense adapt to ground combat? The answer remains uncertain. As we navigate through this tumultuous tale, one must ponder, what will the next chapter in this saga hold? With each passing day, Russia's ability to wage war slips further into decline. Will they rise from these ashes, or is this the beginning of the end? Stay tuned as the story of resilience and desperation unfolds on the battlefield. The escalating conflict in Ukraine, initially anticipated to be a swift operation, has dragged on for over 3 years, revealing a stark and troubling reality for Russia. President Vladimir Putin's grand design, which seemed a guaranteed success, has descended into a battle of attrition, where sheer numbers and resources are crucial. Russia began this war boasting one of the world's largest military arsenals, yet, contrary to expectations, the unraveling of that military might has become glaringly evident. As of September 2025, military analysts estimate that Russia has lost more than 22,600 units of equipment. This staggering number puts their losses at about twice that of Ukraine, a disheartening statistic for a nation that once believed victory was only a matter of time. Among the losses, approximately 13,000 armored vehicles have been rendered unusable, including over 4,100 tanks. Confirmation of this comes from satellite imagery and drone surveillance, revealing a more troubling picture than what is publicly acknowledged. Initially, Russia had around 3,300 tanks actively deployed, but now faces a looming crisis as its older reserves are being pressed into service, leading to increasingly vulnerable equipment. By 2024, reports emerged of T-34 tanks, remnants from World War II, being recalled, a stark symbol of desperation in the face of sustained losses in aging machinery. The reality on the ground is grim. If the current trajectory continues, the Russian military will be out of viable main battle tanks by early 2026. Drone tactics employed by Ukraine have revolutionized the battlefield, making it easier to target and destroy Russian tanks, further exacerbated by Russia's waning production capabilities. The once promising military arsenal now suffers from a catastrophic shortage of skilled personnel and resources, particularly in the defense sector. Despite an ambitious plan to establish 15 new training schools to replenish its ranks, only 2 have progressed, leaving the military in a dire state. The human cost of this conflict is staggering, with estimates of troop losses exceeding 1 million, making it one of the deadliest conflicts of our time. The Soviet-era weapons intended to bolster Russian defenses against Ukrainian advancements have been repurposed for ground attacks, revealing a concerning strategic miscalculation. The S-300 surface-to-air missiles, once a reliable air defense, are being deployed without the necessary adaptations, raising questions about their efficacy. This shift is either a misguided attempt to draw on existing resources or an admission that domestic production has faltered. With dwindling manpower and tanks reaching the battlefield in disrepair, what's next for Russia? A military that once prided itself on overwhelming strength is now scrambling to adapt in the face of relentless losses and changing tides on the battlefield. The fallout from this crisis poses significant implications, not only for Russia's military ambitions but also for global geopolitics as we know it. As the pressure mounts, one has to wonder, can Russia salvage its military prestige, or is this the beginning of an inevitable unraveling? The conflict illustrates a complex web of vulnerabilities, revealing the stark realities of a nation stretched thin. How will this narrative evolve, and could we see further unexpected turns as the autumn months advance? The chessboard of international relations could shift dramatically as the war's impact ripples through economies and alliances worldwide. Keep an eye on the unfolding story. It's a clash of modern warfare against old strategies, with the stakes higher than ever. In the heart of an unfolding geopolitical saga, Russia finds itself entangled in a treacherous web of military struggles. It was merely intended to be a swift campaign, a blitzkrieg against Ukraine meant to last mere days or weeks. Yet, 3.5 years later, the conflict has morphed into a tense standoff, with Russia's resources dwindling alarmingly. Vladimir Putin's ambitious moves now seem more like desperate straws than strategic victories. Attrition is the order of the day as Moscow grapples with staggering losses of military equipment. Here's where the irony strikes. Russia once boasted one of the largest arsenals of tanks and heavy machinery, counting more than 3,300 tanks ready for deployment at the war's outbreak. But how quickly fortunes can change. As of September 2025, over 22,600 units of military equipment have been lost, including around 13,000 armored vehicles. This is nearly double what Ukraine has faced. Imagine a thunderous symphony of destruction as 4,100 tanks fall, many of which became mere artifacts within months, crippled by relentless fire. What's more shocking is the growing realization of this catastrophic loss. Analysts argue that the true number of destroyed or damaged equipment is even higher due to unconfirmed reports, indicating an alarming trend that could see Russia essentially run out of operational vehicles by 2026. As Ukrainian forces adapt, utilizing modern strategies, the disparity in equipment becomes more glaring. The enemy's drones soar overhead, precise and deadly. targeting vulnerable spots while Russian tanks, once deemed indomitable, succumb to outdated tactics and poorly implemented technologies. As casualties mount, the Russian workforce responsible for military production becomes a dwindling resource. The average age of employees within the military manufacturing sector hovers around 45 years, with a mere 16% under 29. This aging workforce bottlenecks training capabilities while losses on the battlefield compound challenges. The financial strain is relentless. Russia's oil and gas revenues dropped by 35% year-on-year by May 2025. With defense expenditures consuming 40% of the federal budget, a stark realization emerges: the war, once a campaign of might, now threatens to unravel under its own weight. Faced with declining revenues, the Kremlin's signals hint at impending cuts, revealing that continuation of the current pace is insurmountable. As if caught in an economic vice, Russia finds itself squeezed by both sanctions and market shifts, grappling with the disillusionment of an underestimated adversary, Ukraine. The West's aid has been a double-edged sword, providing the very equipment that undermines Russian strength. Every piece of surrendered technology handed to Ukraine amplifies the crippling effect on Russia's military ambitions. So, the clock ticks inexorably toward a potential turning point. Hostilities might slow by late 2025 or early 2026 due to this cascading shortage. What choices lie ahead for Putin? He could opt for a retreat, curbing military initiatives while preserving what remains of his equipment. Or he could plunge headlong into continued conflict, risking the scant allies who still hover at his side. In this high-stakes game of chess, one question looms large: will Russia's resolve fracture under the weight of its own hubris, or could an unexpected twist alter the fate of an entire nation? The tension is palpable, and the outcome remains a cliffhanger on the brink of unfolding tragedy. After years of what was meant to be a swift campaign, Russia finds itself in a precarious position. President Vladimir Putin's initial strategy, filled with bravado, has transformed into a grueling war of attrition. Russia, once thought to have an overwhelming military might, is struggling under the weight of its rapidly dwindling resources. Can the nation that entered this conflict with one of the world's largest arsenals truly hold its ground against an agile and determined opponent? As the war extends into 2026, the grim reality sets in. Tactical blunders have cost Russia dearly, raising questions of whether the nation can sustain its military ambitions. Analysts have pointed out that Russia's losses exceed 22,600 units of military equipment, with about 13,000 of those being armor, including over 4,100 tanks in just 3.5 years. Surprisingly, these numbers can only hint at the full extent of the losses, as underreporting seems common in wartime. The once imposing Russian tank force, which started with around 3,300 active units of advanced models, is now forced to bring old models back from storage, unveiling a stark decline in its military effectiveness. Picture the once mighty T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s now being overshadowed by older relics from past conflicts. As Russia struggles to keep pace, it has downgraded its military tactics to reliance on outdated equipment. Reports from the battlefield reveal a dire situation. By November 2024, the Russian forces were deploying T-34 tanks, originally designed during World War II. How had it come to this? Desperation breeds bizarre changes on the battlefield, with troops now resorting to unconventional mobility on dirt bikes and scooters, its once fearsome military units reduced to absurdity. Beyond just tangible losses, the depletion of human resources looms. With the loss of over 1 million troops during the conflict, Russia faces a bulletproof manpower crisis. Initial plans for establishing new military academies have faltered, with only 2 functioning, while an estimated shortage of skilled labor, a staggering 400,000 engineers, is reported. What does this mean for the future of Russian military strategy? It's tough to train or replace experienced personnel when the available workforce is aging, a situation made worse by casualties in the field. Amid the chaos, economics casts a long shadow. Russian oil and gas revenues dipped dramatically, leading to a staggering 40% of the federal budget being consumed by defense spending. This imbalance presents an impossible choice: continue the offensive and exhaust what little remains, or scale back operations and risk falling from grace. With time running out, Moscow's strategy seems to hinge on increasingly desperate measures to maintain an illusion of strength. Is the clock running out for a regime that once seemed unassailable? The shift in battlefield dynamics is palpable. As Ukraine refines its strategies and bolsters its defenses with Western support, Russia finds itself trapped in a loop of depletion. The industrial capabilities once thought solid face a decline, and the world watches as the balance of power shifts. Can the Kremlin continue to carry the burden of a war that seemingly outmatches its capacity to fight? With little option left, Putin might consider opening dialogues for peace, but that could fracture his grip on power, unleashing a wave of uncertainty. As the situation intensifies, both strategic and ethical questions arise. How long before the facade crumbles and the reality of Russian vulnerability becomes evident on the world stage? In this unfolding narrative, the future remains uncertain, teetering on the brink of shocking conclusions. Stay tuned as we unpack the consequences of this war, the twists and turns that lie ahead, and what they mean for global geopolitics. Join us next as we navigate the evolving landscape of modern warfare tactics and their implications for both Russia and Ukraine. In a tale marked by deception, desperation, and disillusion, we find ourselves 3.5 years into what was expected to be a swift military operation. Initially thought to last merely days or weeks, the conflict has revealed its true depth. The mastermind behind this unfolding drama, Russian President Vladimir Putin, had envisioned a quick victory, yet reality has turned his grand strategies into a quagmire of attrition. One might wonder, with one of the world's most formidable arsenals at his disposal, how could things go so awry? Surprisingly, the very strength Putin relied on, an impressive cache of tanks and armored vehicles, has dwindled alarmingly. Analysts point out that Russia could exhaust its supply of critical military equipment by 2026, despite starting with substantial resources. As of September 2025, over 22,600 units of military equipment have been lost in battle. The stark reality is that among these losses, approximately 13,000 were armored vehicles, including more than 4,100 tanks. This staggering figure is derived from verified satellite imagery and drone reconnaissance. Yet, as the dust settles, the questions remain: how did this happen? Even at the beginning of the conflict, Russia had around 3,300 modern tanks, the T-72, T-80, and T-90 models, but their effectiveness has come into question. Reports indicate that older tanks have been hastily refurbished and sent into battle, signaling a disheartening decline in capability. Meanwhile, ongoing production struggles have transitioned from contemporary T-72s to the use of World War II-era T-34 tanks as combat vehicles by late 2024. Once hailed as invincible, the T-80 and T-90, boasting advanced armor technology, were intended to withstand the worst. Yet, revealing cracks in this armor, some of these tanks have been found equipped with rudimentary materials like clay bricks. Moreover, their designs expose critical weaknesses. Drones exploit vulnerabilities, rendering expensive tanks susceptible to destruction from above, a tactic that leaves little room for error. Amidst these critical failures, a phantom of supposed innovation looms over the Russian military. The T-14 Armata, paraded through Moscow in 2015, was heralded as the future of armored warfare. Yet, years have passed, and the anticipated production of thousands of units has crumbled to an insignificant number of prototypes. With each year lost, hope fades for the transformation of the Russian combat landscape. As we delve deeper into the declining potency of Russia's military assets, a chilling realization emerges. Is this the beginning of a final reckoning, where outdated strategies and hubris meet the undeniable march of progress on the battlefield? Stay tuned, the landscape of warfare is shifting, and the stakes could not be higher. What awaits next in this saga of rising and falling powers? 3.5 years. That's how long a conflict expected to last just days or weeks has dragged on. Russia, under President Vladimir Putin, launched what was foretold to be a swift and decisive campaign in Ukraine, a campaign that has now become a slow grind. Once considered a powerhouse, Russia's military strategy is now spiraling into a desperate battle of attrition, but how effective can it be when the supplies are dwindling? Imagine the sight, the vast plains of Ukraine echoing with the sounds of conflict. The roar of engines, the clatter of artillery, the acrid smell of smoke filling the air. With an impressive stockpile of military might, tanks, armored vehicles, aircraft, Russia seemed poised for victory. Yet, a storm brews within, undermining the facade of strength. Reports reveal staggering losses. Over 22,600 units of military equipment have been compromised since the onset of hostilities, double the losses of Ukraine. Among them, nearly 13,000 armored vehicles, with over 4,100 tanks irretrievably damaged or destroyed in a mere 42 months. How could a nation, once brimming with resources and power, find itself on the brink of depletion? Analysts suggest that the true number of lost assets could be even higher, as many damaged tanks have become nearly impossible to conceal. Did Russia miscalculate the resilience of its military machinery? The grim reality suggests that the reserves may be all but exhausted by 2026. The International Institute for Strategic Studies reported that Russia entered the fray with about 3,300 active tanks, modern T-72, T-80, and T-90 models. But as the conflict drags on, older, decrepit tanks like the T-62 have been pressed into service. Strikingly, by late 2024, reports surfaced of T-34s, historic relics from World War II, being deployed to the battlefield. What does it say when a nation resorts to warfare with museum pieces, desperately scrounging for any artillery left in storage? As the shadows of failure loom larger, the question begs to be asked, how did Russia reach such an alarming state? The answer lies in the slow erosion of its production capabilities, from over 120 tanks refitted monthly to a mere 35 by mid-2025. A clear indicator of shortages, where once the best equipment was scavenged, the military is now forced to pull older, increasingly damaged units from the lines. With dwindling resources, could the myth of Russian supremacy be unmasked? The situation escalates as Ukraine's tactics evolve, ruthlessly targeting Russian assets from above. The very design of Russia's armored vehicles, encumbered by an autoloader, leaves crucial vulnerabilities exposed. Vulnerable to precise drone strikes, a single aerial assault could incapacitate an entire tank. Meanwhile, Russia finds itself touting the T-14 Armata, a supposedly revolutionary tank never seen in action. Initial promises of mass production have dwindled to a scant few prototypes. Is this merely an illusion, a breadcrumb thrown to mask the deficiencies of their military strategy? With equipment in tatters and strategies unraveling, Russia stands at a historic crossroads. What happens next? The answer lies shrouded in uncertainty, with the specter of failure looming ever closer.